Hello class, we now come to lecture number 6 on the Upanishads. Remember I mentioned that this is the later development of the Vedas, or the last part of the Vedas. That's what Upanishad means. And it entails the philosophical speculation on the nature of ultimate reality or the self. So this is going to be a philosophical reinterpretation of everything that came before, now put in abstract terminology that seeks to capture and to bring cohesion to the entire system. Now, this book was put together during the 6th century BCE. So I want to make two mentions in regards to that. Remember, the Dravidians began in 3000 BCE. The Aryans invaded in 1500 BCE, and now we're in the 6th century. So even from the Aryans themselves, you're about 8 centuries away from the beginning of the contact between the two cultures. So this is how long it can take for a religious development to be able to mature to the status in which they can be well formulated. So let's not take those things lightly. It takes a lot of thought and reflection, and we'll see some of the significant characters later on as to what we understand to be Hinduism. So the second thing that I wanted to mention is that it is written during the 6th century BCE, and I will use a term now that I hope you guys are able to remember. I believe it is one of your test questions on one of your tests. But this term is the axial age, and it is an axial like axis, like the axis that allow the Earth to rotate upon its own circumference. What you have there is there was a time coin at the beginning of the 20th century, but the time frame usually goes from about the 8th century BCE to about the 2nd century BCE. And what that tells you is that the major spiritual and religious developments in thought were developed during that time, and that kind of set the axis of what has happened over the next 2,800 years or so. So if you were to think of all the historical developments that occurred at that time, you will have the development of Greek philosophy in the 6th century with Thales of Miletus. You will have the development of Confucianism in China and Taoism, and then you have the Upanishads in India, and you have Buddhism in China, and then you have Zoroastrianism that took place during that time, and Judaism, what's called post-biblical Judaism or rabbinic Judaism, was developed during that time, and of course the building up to Christianity. And so what you have there is secularism. So 4 out of the 5 world religions are accounted for at that time. So when I use that term, just think of all the religious movements that kind of arose at that time in history. There was a general sense of questioning what came before, and the influence of that in Hinduism is going to be the Upanishads. So what you have here is the philosophical reflection, and now they have come to the ultimate question of reality, and that is the self. And I will go ahead and explain to you what is contained there. I like to read a small little paragraph on page 37 on this book on the Upanishads, the one that I recommended before. And what it says is, it states, the older meaning of Brahman, remember Brahman, as the Vedic mantras or as the power of the sacrifice, have been replaced in these passages by a more comprehensive understanding of Brahman, or in its universal form, Brahman, as the ultimate or absolute reality of the universe. This is a logical development. Now notice this, how this takes time, and it is since religion is a set of beliefs, there are beliefs that are more basic and some that are less basic, and over time the less basic ones begin to fall in line more consistently with the ones that are more basic. So this is a logical development from the ritual tradition. The sacrifice is the universe. Brahman is the sustaining power of the sacrifice. Remember the creative power that we're looking for? This is it. Therefore, Brahman or Brahman is the sustaining power or reality behind the universe. All things come from Brahman and are supported by Brahman. To know Brahman is to know all, since Brahman is this all, this universe. So that's what you have there now. You have arrived at this new transcendental understanding of ultimate reality as embodied in Brahman. So let's go ahead. I am on click about 72 or so on your Prezi. And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of walk you through the major components. Some of the things I have already stated, but I'll restate them here. So the Upanishad is going to be a reinterpretation of the sacrificial system, trying to attain to a deeper reality. So there are going to be three components of it. One is that knowledge of the sacrifice was a temporary or an unsafe boat by which you could attain knowledge of reality. So there were limits embedded in it. Remember, predictability and causality and expectations were not fulfilled. And there developed a skepticism. These rituals, these practices, these mantras do not